What you're about to hear are 5 true accounts of sleep paralysis that people actually lived through. These aren't made up. These aren't exaggerated. These are real experiences submitted by real people who woke up unable to move, unable to scream, and forced to witness something they'll never forget. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and tap the bell for notifications if these stories keep you up tonight. Now, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, try not to fall asleep. I woke up at exactly 3:17 in the morning, and there was something standing at the foot of my bed. My name is Daniel, and I'm 29 years old now. This happened when I was living alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Phoenix, Arizona, back in 2019. I had just started a new job that required me to wake up at 4:30 every morning. The sleep schedule adjustment was brutal, and I was constantly exhausted. My doctor told me that disrupted sleep patterns could trigger episodes of sleep paralysis, but I didn't really understand what that meant, not until that night. The apartment I rented was small but comfortable. Just a living area, a bathroom, and my bedroom. The closet in my room had sliding doors that never quite closed all the way. There was always a gap, maybe 4 or 5 inches wide, where the doors didn't meet. I kept meaning to fix it, but I never got around to it. I wish I had. That particular week had been especially draining. I was pulling 10-hour shifts and barely eating proper meals. By Friday night, I was running on fumes. I collapsed into bed around 9, which was unusual for me, but my body just couldn't take anymore. I fell asleep almost instantly. No dreams, no restlessness, just pure unconsciousness. And then I was awake. Not slowly waking up, not groggily coming to consciousness. I was just suddenly, completely awake. My eyes were open, and I was staring at the ceiling of my bedroom. The streetlight outside my window cast an orange glow through the blinds, creating thin horizontal lines across the wall. I tried to roll over to check the time on my phone, and that's when I realized something was wrong. I couldn't move. Not my arms, not my legs, not even my fingers. It was like my entire body had been wrapped in invisible chains. I could feel the sheets against my skin, feel the weight of the blanket on my chest, but I couldn't do anything about it. Panic started to build in my chest. I tried to call out, to yell, to make any sound at all, but my throat wouldn't cooperate. The only thing that came out was this weak, pathetic whimper, barely louder than a whisper. And then I saw it. In my peripheral vision, near the closet, there was a shape. At first, I thought it was just the shadow of the door, or maybe a coat I had hung up and forgotten about. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was neither of those things. It was a figure, tall, impossibly tall, maybe 7 feet at least, time or foives. It was standing in the gap between the closet doors, perfectly still, like it had been there the whole time. Like it had been watching me sleep. I couldn't make out any features. No face, no clothing, just a silhouette that seemed to absorb the light around it. It was darker than the darkness of the room, if that makes any sense. A void in the shape of a person. I told myself it wasn't real. I told myself this was just my mind playing tricks on me, that I was still half asleep, but it felt real. Every instinct I had was screaming at me that something was in my room, something that shouldn't be there. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, frozen in place, watching me. I could feel its attention on me, like a physical weight pressing down on my body. The pressure on my chest got heavier, and I started to feel like I couldn't get enough air. Minutes passed, maybe 5. Maybe 10. Time doesn't work normally during sleep paralysis. It stretches and warps. and every second feels like an eternity. I tried with everything I had to move. I focused all my energy on just wiggling a single finger, just proving to myself that I still had control over my own body. Nothing worked. And then the figure moved. It was subtle at first, just a slight shift, like it was adjusting its position. But then it took a step forward, out of the closet, into my room. I wanted to scream so badly. I wanted to run, to fight, to do anything other than just lie there helplessly. But my body refused to cooperate. All I could do was watch as this thing moved closer. It glided more than walked. Smooth, almost graceful movements, like it was floating an inch above the carpet. It circled around the foot of my bed, staying in my peripheral vision the entire time, never getting close enough for me to see it clearly, but never leaving my sight either. The room got colder. I could feel goosebumps rising on my arms, could feel the chill seeping through my blanket. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Sweat was beading on my forehead, but I couldn't wipe it away. The figure stopped at the right side of my bed. It stood there, looming over me, close enough that if I could move my hand, I could have touched it. But of course, I couldn't move my hand. I couldn't move anything. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Me paralyzed in my bed, this shadow towering beside me. It felt like hours, but it was probably only minutes. The terror was absolute, complete. I have never felt more vulnerable in my entire life. Slowly, the figure started to lean forward. It bent at what should have been in the waist, bringing itself closer to my face. I could see now that it didn't have eyes, or at least none that I could see. Just smooth, featureless darkness where a face should have been. It leaned in closer and closer, until its face, if you could call it that, was only inches from mine. The cold intensified. It radiated off this thing like it was made of ice. I could smell something too, time 0.3s. Something stale and old, like a room that hadn't been opened in decades. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. One moment it was there, hovering over me, and the next, the space beside my bed was empty. No movement, no sound, no indication of where it went. It simply vanished. Seconds later, I could move again. I shot up in bed, gasping for air, my whole body trembling. I scrambled for the lamp on my nightstand and flooded the room with light. There was nothing there. The closet doors were still slightly open, the same gap between them that had always been there. No figure, no shadow, nothing out of place. I checked my phone. 3:17 in the morning. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in my bed with every light in the apartment turned on, watching that closet until the sun came up. The next day, I went to the hardware store and bought a new set of closet doors. I installed them myself, making sure they closed completely. No gaps, no spaces for anything to stand in. I've had sleep paralysis a few times since then. The doctor says it's related to my irregular sleep schedule and stress. But I've never seen that figure again. Time 0.8s. Part of me knows it wasn't real. That it was just my brain misfiring, creating shapes out of shadows, turning my deepest fears into something tangible. That's what sleep paralysis does. It takes your terror and gives it form. But another part of me, a smaller, more primitive part, still wonders what was actually standing in my closet that night, and why it chose to come out. I still check the closet doors every night before I go to sleep, just to make sure they're closed all the way, just to make sure there's no gap, because I never want to see what might be waiting on the other side. There was a face pressed against my window, and it was smiling at me. My name is Jenna, and I'm 26. This experience happened 2 years ago, when I was living in a small rental house in suburban Ohio. The house was old, built sometime in the 1940s, and it had all the quirks you'd expect from a place that age. Creaky floors, drafty windows, radiators that clanked and hissed through the winter months. But the rent was cheap, and it was in a safe neighborhood, so I didn't mind the imperfections. My bedroom was on the second floor, which always made me feel secure. The window faced the backyard, overlooking a small patch of grass and an old oak tree. No neighbors could see in, which meant I usually left the blinds open at night. I liked watching the moonlight filter through the oak's branches as I fell asleep. That particular night in November, I had come home late from a friend's birthday dinner. I was exhausted, maybe a little tipsy from the 2 glasses of wine I'd had, and all I wanted was to collapse into bed. I didn't bother changing into pajamas. I just kicked off my shoes, pulled the covers over myself, and was asleep within minutes. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. The room was completely dark, which meant the moon had either set or moved behind clouds. My first thought was that I needed water. My mouth was dry, probably from the wine. I tried to sit up, was a shape on the other side of the glass. At first I thought it might be a branch from the oak tree, blown close by the wind. But branches don't have faces. It took my eyes a moment to adjust, to make sense of what I was seeing. And when they did, I wanted to scream more than I've ever wanted anything in my life. There was a person at my window, a figure pressed against the glass, looking in at me. The face was pale, almost white, like all the blood had drained out of it. Wide eyes stared directly at me, unblinking, fixed on my frozen form. And it was smiling. This wide, unnatural grin, stretching across its face in a way that didn't look right, like someone who had seen pictures of smiles but didn't quite understand how they worked. My window was on the second floor. There was no balcony, no fire escape, nothing for anyone to stand on. The only way someone could be at that window was if they were floating, or if they were impossibly tall. Time. 0.3s. Pressed against the cold glass, that horrible smile never wavering. I could see now that its eyes weren't quite right either. They were too large, too round, reflecting what little light there was, like a cat's eyes in the dark. The glass started to fog up. Condensation formed around the face, like it was giving off heat, or maybe cold. I watched as the moisture spread across the window, obscuring my view of the backyard behind the figure. Then it raised a hand. Slowly, deliberately, a pale hand came into view beside the face. The fingers were long and thin, with nails that seemed too sharp, too pointed. It pressed its palm flat against the glass. And then it started to tap, one finger at a time, a slow, rhythmic tapping against my window. Tap, tap, tap. Like it was trying to get my attention, like it wanted me to know it was there. The tapping continued for what felt like forever. Each tap sent a jolt of terror through my frozen body. I couldn't look away. I couldn't close my eyes. All I could do was lie there and watch as this thing made its presence known. Now I felt a spark of hope. Maybe it was leaving. Maybe this nightmare was finally over. But the face remained, still pressed against the window, still staring, still smiling. And then it tilted its head. A slow, unnatural movement, like a curious dog examining something interesting. Except there was nothing curious about this. There was only hunger, only patience. The figure stayed at my window for what must have been 20 minutes, maybe longer. I lost track of time somewhere in the middle of it all. Every second stretched into an eternity of pure, absolute dread. Eventually, the clouds must have shifted because moonlight suddenly flooded into the room. The silver light illuminated everything, including the window. Near any windows, apartment now. 12th floor. No trees anywhere near my windows. But every night before I go to sleep, I close the blinds, all the way. Something sat down on the edge of my bed, and I couldn't turn around to see what it was. I'm Tyler, 31 years old, and this happened in my apartment in Denver last winter. I've struggled with insomnia since my early 20s. Some nights I can fall asleep normally, but most nights I spend hours staring at the ceiling, waiting for exhaustion to finally pull me under. Over the years, I've tried everything: melatonin, white noise machines, meditation apps, prescription sleep aids. Some things work better than others, but nothing has ever cured it completely. That particular week, the insomnia had been especially brutal. I was averaging maybe 3 hours of sleep a night, and it was starting to affect everything. My work was suffering, my mood was terrible, and I was making stupid mistakes constantly. By Thursday, I was desperate for real rest. I took a double dose of my sleep medication that night. I know you're not supposed to do that, but I was so tired. I didn't care about the risks. I just wanted to sleep. It worked, sort of. I fell asleep quickly, but the sleep was strange, heavy and thick, like swimming through molasses. And then, at some point in the middle of the night, I woke up, or at least part of me woke up. I was lying on my side, facing the wall. I could see the faint glow of my phone charger on the nightstand, could make out the texture of the paint on the wall a few inches from my face. I was conscious, aware, but completely unable to move. The sleep paralysis had started. I'd experienced it before, maybe a handful of times throughout my life. It was always terrifying, but I knew what it was. I knew it would pass. I just had to wait it out, but this time was different. I felt the mattress shift behind me. It was subtle at first, just a slight dip, like someone had placed their hand on the edge of the bed. But then the pressure increased. The mattress sank down, slowly, deliberately, as if something was climbing onto the bed. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to turn around, to see what was behind me, to confront whatever had invaded my bedroom. But I couldn't move. I was stuck facing the wall, completely helpless, while something settled onto my bed, inches from my back. The weight was significant, heavy enough that I could feel my body tilting slightly toward it, like when you share a bed with someone much larger than you. But I lived alone. There shouldn't have been anyone else in my apartment, let alone in my bed. I tried to call out. I tried to yell, to demand whoever or whatever this was to leave. Nothing came out except a weak, pathetic moan, muffled by my own paralyzed throat. The presence behind me didn't respond. It just sat there, silent and still, its weight pressing down on the mattress. I could feel warmth radiating from it, which somehow made everything worse. It felt alive, real, not a hallucination or a dream, but an actual physical presence in my bed. Minutes passed. The thing behind me didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just waited, patient, deliberate, like it had all the time in the world. And then it shifted its weight. Felt the mattress move as it repositioned itself. The depression in the bed traveled upward, closer to where my body lay frozen. It was moving toward my head, slowly, inch by inch. The terror was overwhelming. I wanted to cry, to scream, to do anything to make this stop. But all I could do was lie there, feeling this unknown weight creep closer and closer to me. It stopped when it reached my pillow. I could feel it now, just behind my head, so close I could almost sense it looming over me. The warmth was stronger now, like sitting too close to a fire. And there was a smell, something musty and old, like clothes left in a damp closet for too long. For what felt like an eternity, nothing happened. The weight stayed where it was, present but motionless, waiting for something I couldn't understand. Then I felt pressure on my shoulder. Not a tap, not a grab, just steady, unrelenting pressure. Like a hand was resting on me, pinning me down. The warmth spread through my shirt, seeping into my skin. I've never felt more vulnerable in my entire life. Lying there, paralyzed, something unknown touching me, unable to turn and face whatever it was. The not knowing was almost worse than the fear. My imagination filled in the blanks with every horrible possibility. The pressure on my shoulder increased. It pushed down harder, forcing my body deeper into the mattress. I could feel the springs compressing beneath me, could feel my ribs aching from the weight. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The pressure lifted. The weight on the bed disappeared. The warmth faded away, replaced by the normal chill of my winter bedroom. I lay there for another full minute, still frozen, waiting for it to come back. But nothing happened. The bed was empty behind me. Whatever had been there was gone. When the paralysis finally broke, I spun around so fast I nearly fell off the bed. My heart was pounding, my whole body trembling, but there was nothing there. Just my empty bedroom exactly as I had left it. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat up against the headboard, watching the empty side of my bed, waiting for the mattress to sink again. It never did. I talked to my doctor about the experience. She said that tactile hallucinations during sleep paralysis are common, especially when combined with sleep medication. She reduced my dosage and recommended I never double up again. I listened, but I know what I felt. Something was in my bed that night. Something sat down behind me, crept closer to my head, and pressed its hand against my shoulder. No amount of medical explanation can make that feeling go away. I've gotten a new mattress since then. Different firmness, different brand, everything new. Part of me thought that if I replaced the bed, whatever was attached to it might not follow. So far, it seems to have worked. The paralysis episodes have stopped. Nothing has sat down behind me since that night, but I still sleep facing the door now. Never the wall, because if something ever comes back, I want to see it coming. I need to see what's been watching me all along. Someone was calling my name from the hallway, and it sounded exactly like my mother. I'm David, and I'm 33 now. This happened in my apartment in Seattle about 4 years ago. My mother passed away when I was 24. Cancer. It was slow and painful, and watching her decline over those final months was one of the hardest things I've ever experienced. She was my best friend, the person I called whenever something good or bad happened, the voice that made everything feel like it would be okay. Losing her left a hole in my life that nothing has ever been able to fill. The night in question came about a year after I had moved into a new apartment. I was working as a software developer at a startup, and the hours were brutal. 16-hour days were normal, sometimes longer if we were pushing toward a deadline. Sleep had become a luxury I couldn't always afford. That particular week, we were in crunch mode. I had worked nearly 80 hours by Thursday, and my body was starting to rebel. I was getting headaches, having trouble focusing, and occasionally seeing things in my peripheral vision that weren't there. Classic signs of severe sleep deprivation. Thursday night, I finally crashed. I came home around 11, collapsed onto my bed fully clothed, and was unconscious within seconds. It wasn't restful sleep. It was the kind of forced unconsciousness that comes when your brain just can't take anymore. I don't know what time I woke up. My room was dark, and for a moment I didn't know where I was. I tried to sit up to check my phone to orient myself, but nothing happened. My body wouldn't respond. The familiar terror of sleep paralysis washed over me. I had experienced it before, a few times in college when I was similarly sleep-deprived. I knew what was happening. I knew it would pass. But that knowledge didn't make it any less frightening. And then I heard it. A voice coming from the hallway outside my bedroom. Soft and distant at first, like someone speaking from the far end of the apartment. I couldn't make out the words, but there was something familiar about the tone, something that made my heart ache even through the fear. The voice got louder, closer, and now I could understand what it was saying. It was calling my name. David. David, sweetheart. It was my mother's voice. I know how that sounds. I know it was just a hallucination, my exhausted brain pulling memories out of storage and making them feel real. But in that moment, paralyzed in my bed, I couldn't process that logically. All I knew was that my dead mother was calling to me from my hallway. David, come here. The voice was gentle, exactly the way she used to speak to me when I was a child. Warm and loving, the voice that had sung me lullabies and read me bedtime stories. Hearing it again after so many years, even like this, was agonizing. I wanted to respond. I wanted to call out to her, to ask why she was there, to tell her I missed her. But my throat was as paralyzed as the rest of me. All I could do was lie there and listen. The voice moved closer. I could hear it now just outside my bedroom door, which I had left slightly open. Through the crack, I could see the dark hallway beyond. Nothing visible, just shadows, piled on top of shadows. David, why won't you answer me? There was something wrong with the voice now. It still sounded like my mother, but there was an edge to it, a sharpness that she had never had in life. It was like listening to a recording that had been slightly corrupted. The notes were right, but the music was off. I've been waiting for you, sweetheart. Why won't you come to me? I tried harder than I've ever tried anything to break out of the paralysis. I focused every ounce of my will on moving a single finger, on making any kind of movement at all. Nothing. My body remained a prison. The bedroom door began to move. Slowly, inch by inch, it swung inward. The hinges creaked, a sound I had never noticed in all the months I had lived there. The gap widened, revealing more of the dark hallway. And something was standing in that hallway. I couldn't make out details. It was just a shape, darker than the darkness around it, standing motionless at the end of the corridor. Too tall to be my mother, too still to be human. But the voice continued, emanating from that shape, as if it was the source. David, I'm so disappointed in you. The warmth was gone now, replaced by something cold and accusatory. It sounded like my mother, but the words were wrong. These weren't things she would ever say. You never visited me. You let me die alone. That wasn't true. I was there when she passed. I held her hand in that hospital room, watching the monitors flatline. But in that moment, paralyzed and terrified, the accusation cut deeper than any physical wound. The figure began to move. It stepped forward, entering my line of sight through the widening door. Each step was wrong somehow. Too slow, too deliberate, like a marionette being controlled by an inexperienced puppeteer. I'm coming to see you now, sweetheart. The voice had changed again. It was layered now, like multiple voices speaking at once. My mother's voice on top, but something else underneath. Something deep and guttural, something that had never been human. The figure reached the doorway. It stood there, filling the frame, towering nearly to the ceiling. I still couldn't make out any features, but I could feel it looking at me, feel its attention locked onto my frozen form. "Don't you want to see me?" the layered voices asked in unison. "Don't you miss your mother?" I wanted to scream that it wasn't her, that whatever this thing was, it had no right to use her voice to defile her memory like this. But I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I could only watch as it stepped into my room. 1 step, 2 steps, each one bringing it closer to my bed. The temperature dropped with every inch it traveled. Cold radiated from its form, chilling the air until I could see my own breath misting in front of my face. It stopped at the foot of my bed. The layered voice spoke one final time. "I'll always be with you, David." And then it lunged. In that same instant, I jerked awake, truly awake this time, with full control of my body. I scrambled backward so fast, I slammed my head against the headboard, but I barely felt the pain. I was too busy scanning the room, searching for the figure that had been standing there moments before. There was nothing. My bedroom was empty. The door was closed, exactly as I had left it when I came home. There was no figure, no voice, no impossible cold. Just me, sitting in my bed, covered in sweat, shaking uncontrollably. I called in sick the next day, and the day after that. I told my manager I had the flu, but the truth was I couldn't face going back to work. I needed to sleep, real sleep. Not the kind that left me trapped in nightmares. I've never experienced sleep paralysis that intense again. And I hope I never do. Not because of the fear, though that was terrible enough, but because of the way it used my mother's voice against me. Some things should stay sacred. Some memories should never be twisted into weapons. But my own brain betrayed me that night, turned my grief into a monster, and made me question every cherished memory I still hold on to. I keep a recording of my mother's actual voice on my phone now, a voicemail she left me the week before she passed. Whenever I start to forget what she really sounded like, I play it. It reminds me that she was warm and loving, nothing like the thing that called to me from my hallway. And it helps me remember that the voice I heard that night wasn't her. It was never her. Just something wearing her memory like a mask. I watched something crawl across my ceiling, and then it looked directly at me. My name is Sarah, and I'm 28. This experience happened last year in the house I grew up in back in rural Pennsylvania. I had returned home to help my father after he had surgery on his back. He needed someone to take care of him for a few weeks while he recovered, and since I worked remotely, I volunteered. My old bedroom was exactly as I had left it when I moved out at 18. Same posters on the walls, same furniture, same twin bed pushed against the corner. It was strange sleeping there again after so many years. The house itself had always felt a little off to me. It was built in the late 1800s and had that old house energy that some people find charming. I never did. The floors creaked, the pipes groaned, and at night the whole place seemed to settle and shift in ways that felt almost alive. On my 4th night back, I went to bed around midnight. I had spent the day helping my father with physical therapy exercises, cooking meals, doing laundry. I was exhausted in that satisfying way that comes from doing good work. I expected to sleep soundly. I fell asleep quickly, but I didn't stay asleep. At some point in the deep hours of the night, I found myself suddenly awake. Not the gradual transition from sleep to consciousness that usually happens. This was instant. One moment I was asleep, and the next, I was staring at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom, completely aware and completely unable to move. I had read about sleep paralysis before, but I had never experienced it. The sensation was exactly as terrifying as people described. My mind was alert, screaming at my body to do something, anything, but nothing responded. I was trapped inside myself. The room was dark, but not completely. Enough moonlight filtered through the curtains that I could make out the shapes of furniture, the outline of my dresser against the wall, the old rocking chair in the corner that had been there since I was a child. Everything looked normal. Everything felt wrong. And then I noticed movement on the ceiling. It started in the far corner above the door. At first, I thought it was a shadow cast by something outside, maybe a tree branch moving in the wind. But the movement was too deliberate, too controlled. Something was crawling along my ceiling. It moved like an insect, slow and jerky, stopping every few inches to adjust its position. But it wasn't an insect. It was too big. Much, much too big. As it moved closer to the center of the ceiling, I could make out more details. It was humanoid in shape, with long limbs that bent at unnatural angles. Its arms and legs stretched out to the sides, pressing against the ceiling, defying every law of gravity I had ever learned. It moved upside down, its back pressed flat against the plaster, its face pointed down toward my frozen body. I tried to scream. Every instinct I had demanded that I make noise, that I alert my father in the next room, that I do something to break this nightmare. But my throat was as paralyzed as the rest of me. All that came out was the faintest whisper, barely louder than a breath. The thing on the ceiling continued its slow crawl. It was directly above my bed now, maybe 8 feet above my paralyzed form. Close enough that I could see the way its joints moved, the way its fingers gripped the ceiling like suction cups, the way its too long neck craned downward to look at me. And then it stopped moving. For a long, terrible moment, we just stared at each other. I couldn't see its face clearly in the darkness, but I could feel its gaze. Heavy and unblinking, boring into me with an intensity that made my soul want to flee my body. Slowly, impossibly slowly, it began to lower itself. Its grip on the ceiling didn't change. Instead, its body seemed to stretch. Its torso elongated, growing longer and thinner, bringing its face closer to mine while its limbs stayed attached to the ceiling above. It was like watching taffy being pulled or a rubber band being stretched to its breaking point. The temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my breath now, thin wisps of vapor escaping from my nose. The cold seeped through my blankets, through my clothes, deep into my bones. My body wanted to shiver, but even that involuntary response was denied to me. The thing's face got closer, 3 feet above me, then 2, then 1. I could make out features now, if you could call them that. Where eyes should have been, there were just hollow sockets, dark and empty. Where a mouth should have been, there was a lipless slit, too wide for any human face, curving upward at the corners in a grotesque approximation of a smile. No nose, no ears, just smooth, pale skin stretched tight over a skull that was somehow both too big and too small at the same time. The hollow sockets looked directly into my eyes. Even without any visible organs of sight, I knew it could see me, knew it was studying me, analyzing me, deciding something about me. Its mouth opened. The lipless slit parted, revealing rows of needle-thin teeth that seemed to go back forever. A sound came from inside, somewhere between a hiss and a whisper. It might have been trying to speak. I couldn't understand the words if there were any. Just that awful, inhuman sound, filling my ears and burrowing into my brain. Its face was inches from mine now. So close I could smell something rotten wafting from that open mouth. So close I could feel coldness radiating from its skin, chilling my face until it went numb. so close that if I could move, I could have reached up and touched that horrible visage. And then it smiled wider. That lipless mouth stretched even further until it seemed to wrap around the sides of its head. The needle teeth glinted in the moonlight. It was pleased with something, satisfied with what it had found in my frozen gaze. It stayed like that for what felt like forever, suspended above me, smiling that impossible smile, drinking in my terror like it was the most nourishing thing in the world. And then, with the same agonizing slowness, it began to retract. Its body contracted, shortening back toward the ceiling. Its face pulled away from mine, that smile never wavering, those hollow sockets never breaking contact with my eyes. When it reached the ceiling again, it resumed its crawling. But this time, it was moving away, toward the corner, toward the shadows. It moved faster now, those long limbs carrying it with surprising speed. When it reached the corner where the wall met the ceiling, it did something that still haunts me. It turned to look at me one final time. That horrible face, still smiling, nodded slightly, like it was acknowledging something between us, like we had made some kind of agreement I didn't remember consenting to. And then it crawled into the corner and disappeared. Not behind anything, not through anything. It just melted into the shadows and was gone. The paralysis broke moments later. I sat up so fast I nearly gave myself whiplash. My hands were shaking, my whole body was drenched in cold sweat, and I was having trouble catching my breath. I fumbled for the lamp on my nightstand and flooded the room with light. There was nothing on the ceiling. No marks, no scratches, no indication that anything had ever been there. Just the same cracked plaster that had been there my entire childhood. I didn't sleep another minute in that room. I spent the rest of the night in the living room, every light in the house turned on, watching the corners of the ceiling like a paranoid sentry. I stayed 2 more weeks to help my father recover. I never slept in my old bedroom again. I made a bed on the couch, told him the mattress in my room was hurting my back. Those were real accounts from real people who lived through moments they'll never forget. If this video made your skin crawl, subscribe to the Nightmare Index right now. Leave a like if these stories got under your skin. Hit that notification bell so you're first to know when the next horror drops. And remember, the next time you wake up in the middle of the night, paralyzed, unable to scream, you might not be imagining what you see in the shadows. Sleep well.